Welcome to Between the Covers Summer Series, where we put the spotlight on South Florida authors. Hi, I'm Ann Bocock, and joining me is Henry Woodman. The book is The Reincarnation of Marie. It is historical fiction, it is a paranormal romance, and it asks the question, does reincarnation exist? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am happy you were here because there's a lot to talk about with this book. This is layered with history, emotion. It explores reincarnation and, at the very least, a very unusual love story.
Yes.
So actually, the book was written decades ago by your father.
That is correct.
Never published until now.
Yes.
There was a Marie. Marie was in the late 1800s. Marie has kept this intimate journal. After her death, the book becomes a bestseller. So you give us a peek into this love story of Marie and this young lieutenant that is obsessed with her.
Right. Dad wrote the book as sort of a tribute to a friend. Now, when I read it, I was thinking, I was in Los Angeles. This is in the early 80s, and I'm thinking, you know, I want to produce and direct movies. And my sister sees this little manuscript typewritten, and she sends it to me, and I fell in love. I was in tears, and I called Dad, and ultimately he said, well, I was just not doing anything as a tribute, so I bought the rights. Ultimately, you know, the story is about Marie Barkas, who died in 1884. She had written a journal 10 years prior, from 14 to 24, when she passed of tuberculosis. And in the journal, she was very raw and candid and frank and talked about things that women at the time didn't talk about, you know, sexuality and things of that nature. And so 2 years after her death, her mom publishes her journal, and it becomes an international bestseller, scandalous international bestseller. And then about 70 years later, a young army officer picks up the book on the Seine River in Paris, reads it, and he finds himself oddly attracted to the author, who had died 70 years earlier, Marie. And
nothing weird about that.
No. You know, it sort of talks to some echoes of the past, like she's talking to him. And in her journal, she would say things like, I know I'm dying. She knew she was dying. I know I'm dying, but I will find you in time, my love. She didn't find her true love. And he starts to believe she's writing to him, right? And so he goes on and he's like, eventually visiting the places she's visiting museums that have pictures of places, of women that she says, I look like this and my body's like this and my hair's like this. And he would sit there and, you know, this is before the internet, understand, okay, who is this person? Until ultimately he visits her tomb in Passy, one of the oldest cemeteries in Paris. At which point he realizes, this is a bit crazy. This is sort of an obsession that has taken over. I think I need to leave because it's crazy. I've fallen in love and she's a dead woman, right?
The book, the story is told by an army friend. Do we know, did that happen? Or was this your father's own romantic story? Or are we better off just coming to our own conclusions?
You know, Ann, if I had the answer to that question, I would tell you right now, but I don't know. You know, the author and the person it was told to evidently was my father. Now, we don't know if the story was told or his friend, in air quotes, he read the journal and had this obsessive passion, this neurotic passion about this dead woman, you know, because there's these echoes of the things she would say that would resonate, right? And so I wasn't entirely clear, and I never asked. My father passed 14 years ago, and as a result, you know, I never got a chance because life got in the way. I didn't produce the movie. I went on and I did other things, and then eventually I said, okay, I sold my business. I'm now going to publish the book and then develop a TV series. So I don't know the answer to the question. I'm guessing it was his Neurotic obsession, that's just a guess.
I think we're better off just coming to our own conclusions anyway, but why do you think he didn't publish the book?
Well, he was a travel writer and a nonfiction guy, and he really didn't have he wasn't a romantic paranormal writer at all. So I think it was more of an outlet to let this emotion, as he claims, for a tribute for a friend, out on the paper, right? And as a result, it wasn't something that he thought was in his wheelhouse. And, you know, it was like Air Travel Bargains, Discovering Yucatan, Nazca, books of that nature were things that he had authored.
What's fascinating to me is the story. This man finds his soulmate, which is the good news, and then unfortunately she is long dead. The writing paints this vivid picture, and it takes us into Paris, and to me, it's so visual. You alluded to, you are working on a screen version?
Yes, yes.
Because it needs that.
Well, what's cool is it blends fact and fiction, because Marie Barkas was an actual figure in history. She wrote a book called I Am the Most Interesting Book of All, which was her journal, right? And the facts were all there, and he picked it up and he goes, it must be me she's writing to. Now, all of the locations in Paris and all that surrounding area exist, right? Marie went to Saint-Fargeau to have her tuberculosis treatment, and at the time in the late 1800s, it was very primitive, right? And so all of these things existed. Even her tomb still exists, and I went to visit that years ago. So he then finds himself a bit worried about his own sanity, you know? And this is where the book takes a turn, where he then finds what he believes to be Marie reincarnated. The minute he hears the name Maria of the woman that he meets, he realizes, oh my God, that's the reincarnated Marie. That was her original name in Russian. And so that's where the book starts to take a turn into what he believes is finding her reincarnated.
That is the point where the book really challenges the reader. What is it that you want people to take away from the book?
Well, I think the takeaways for the most part are, what is it really all about? Why are we here? Are there such things? You know, we talk about soulmates, and we talk about reincarnation, we talk about other lives and past lives and karma and sins of the father. And we have to sort of take a step back and say, why do we have these beliefs? Is there something about them? And this book explores a lot of those. Does the past life intersect, and are there echoes of a previous life that affect our current lives, right? And so we tend to look at our lives and say, wow, is our love really truly a soulmate, or did we have to work out some karma from a previous life and then we have to meet again in another life? It doesn't obviously answer all these questions, but it poses those very big questions and this mystery of reincarnation and echoes of the past.
Is there any chance that you would write a companion piece to this about your own journey with your father's work?
Wow. You know, I would consider a sort of a documentary on the making of the series. The series is called Slippin', which is a play on words of slipping through time, but it is a far deeper dive into how interconnected the lives are. Not just Marie and our protagonist Jan in this story, but Marie, and we've updated it a little bit more contemporary, but we've added some elements of other people that intersected in Marie's real life, like these author pen pal relationships. You had Guy Maupassant was an author at the time. So we sort of updated it to say there's a lot more going on, and how is it that something that happened back then is affecting how you are and you react today, or to somebody you've met, and what were they to you in the past life?
It is fascinating, and thank you so much for bringing it to light. The book is The Reincarnation of Marie. Henry Woodman, this has been such a pleasure. I can't wait to see the film version.
Me too. Thank you.
I'm Ann Bocock. Please join me on the next Between the Covers.